Welcome to Your 2 Cents, the podcast, made by Canadian Content Studios in partnership with credit unions. Hi, I'm Jonathan Torrens. Whether we have it or not, know a lot about it or nothing at all, way too many of us live with this cloud of shame that the subject of money casts over us. But why is that? Most of us have debt. That's pretty normal. In fact, the only weird thing about it is how weird it feels to talk about it. In this special 2-part episode, Alicia and Sylvia have gathered an incredible group of women to open up and share all about their personal experiences with money. First, you'll hear about their relationships with it growing up, and next time, how they feel about money now, as adults. This is Debt Roundtable Part 1.
So last year, Sylvia and I had a really wonderful conversation about debt. And it was honestly the first time that I really sat down to talk about debt and realized that debt and my financial health had been so significantly connected to my physical and my mental health. We had a wonderful conversation, but I felt kind of gross at first having the conversation. And I think it's because we don't really talk about it.
So Ton, talk to me about what money was like in your house growing up. Did you ever talk about money growing up?
I think the only time we talked about money was really to know that there wasn't a lot of it and we need to make it. And I think that kind of set me up to kind of be stressed about money at an early age. Like I saw my parents working, I knew I needed to work as early as I could, and I just wish that there was more conversations around like the importance of money, but also like how that money can last into the future. But you know, there wasn't a lot of extra. So we didn't have the financial planning talks, we didn't have, let's set up a savings account. It was just survival mode. And I think that kind of set the stage to really make me feel a certain way about money and talking about money. Like I was never comfortable talking about money growing up.
I would say same situation for me. My parents worked really hard, but we never had extra. So it was all about, we need to pay this bill, we didn't need to get to this next month. And so there was no forward thinking. And yeah, definitely survival. And I think it does impact how you look at money, how you feel about it. I did the same thing as you. I ended up working like 8 jobs when I was in university and not really thinking about what I was doing with that money, but just kind of like a hamster on a wheel, which is not really smart either.
I don't think we really ever talked about it.
It was just really a point of tension in our household. Yeah. And so we didn't really learn, how to save it or how to budget or anything like that. And we didn't even learn that in school.
No. Our parents have their own business and they've worked hard for everything they have. But we were very similar to like what we had is what we had. There was no more, no less. And I think that that's very much my motto, or was my motto for a very long time. It wasn't really budgeting, it was just what can I get out of what I have, because there's no more, no less than that. So.
And how to make like the dollar stretch.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of clever ways when we were growing up to make that, money last a little bit longer, or like clever things to do like around the house, or like back to school was a huge stress time for us because we had 3 kids and my parents just, there wasn't enough sometimes. So I think those are like the little lessons that kind of stuck with me.
You have to get crafty for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
You still want the things.
Right.
You still want to wear the clothes and look cute, or go out with your friends. And so I don't know if this is true for y'all, but like you figure out a way, and you kind of come to realize that if you want something, you have to work for it, and that's just how it is. It's not just going to fall in your lap, which in some ways I think isn't the worst thing. I think it gives you a strong work ethic. But to your point earlier, I do wish that I had a mindset of investing and thinking about retirement. Sad to say, but I only just started thinking about this recently, and I'm 36 years old, so yeah.
But I think my experience was a little bit different on the surface, but also the same. So my mom grew up very, very poor, like very, very poor, and she talked to us about that a lot as kids, and there was 4 of us growing up, and my dad had a very bad gambling addiction, so he worked very hard, my mom worked very hard, but obviously that is very difficult on a family. So she tried to hide that from us, and I knew that from quite a young age. I could see her being stressed about money. I would hear, arguments and things happening about money, but then she would turn around and try to shield us from that, as you do, right? Trying to shield your kids, and she was doing the best she could with what she had at the time. But that really affected me in a way that I really got stressed about money a lot and started thinking, okay, what can I do? How can I help? Like 12 years old, right? So definitely wasn't a lot of it, but we were almost taught and led to believe that everything's fine, don't worry, the lights just aren't working because the power is out, those kinds of things. But there comes an age when you realize there's something else going on here. So I had a lot of anxiety around money and finances and keeping it and not letting anyone else touch it. And that's really affected me today, to the point whereas I control all the money in our house because my mom did that. And in my mind, it's like, when you did school projects in high school, I'll just do it. Give me, right? So that's my way, and I recognize that. That's my way of trying to control it and make sure that we're okay, everything's okay, and that I know that comes directly from that experience as a kid.
Totally, and I come from my mom was an immigrant to the country, came with nothing, worked really hard. She had to redo her education again, didn't speak the language, had to go through all these steps in her life, and I was kind of the same thing. I know that there were times, my dad owned his own business, there were definitely times where there were peaks and valleys. We were definitely shielded from the valleys, and it was always, led to believe. And in our case, I think sometimes it was almost very distracting. Like, we might live in a really beautiful neighborhood, but then you're hearing a conversation about something where things maybe aren't so great. And so that was really complicated because there was a huge facade almost going on about what did we have versus what were they showing that we had.
And what's important.
And what's important.
What's important to tell other people or show other people.
Totally. And so it comes from this like stoic, everything's fine, I've gone through so much already, but what are we doing now? And then when I became older, I had no idea about anything. Like, I just started learning about retirement too. I only started investing a couple of years ago. I went through, buying my first house with having no idea. I was like, okay, we have enough for a down payment, and now we have a house. What else are we doing to look after ourselves later? So our parents, I think our parents were so worried about not talking about money at all. If we don't talk about the good or the bad, it just doesn't exist. But then you show up as an adult in the world and you have no idea what to do with yourself. But that work ethic and all those things came from through myself and my sister as same thing. The minute I turned 12 and could get my babysitting thing, I'm babysitting, totally. I must have needed to be a mature 12, but same thing, it was like turned whatever age, I think it was like 14 or 15 when you could work. On my birthday, got a job. Like, all those milestones were so important to be making my own money, so I felt like I wasn't being a burden on anybody. I could buy my own clothes and I could keep up with my friends at school because I'd work and save my paychecks for my,
And it's control.
Thing.
Like, going back to what you said, it's definitely control, because when you've grown up without, you don't want to feel that way anymore. Right. So if there's something that you can do about it, you're going to keep going. Like, nothing is stopping you. Yeah.
And I'm really grateful too. Like, I think we were very lucky as kids that we didn't really know that we didn't have a lot, in a sense that, like, I had everything I needed. And then now as we're adults, we'll talk about like the nostalgia of certain foods or certain things we had as kids, and my mom will be like, well, we only had that because that's all we could afford. And I'll be like, but it was like my favorite meal. Like, I had we love pasta and tomato with butter. It's like one of my favorite meals, but it was like all my parents could afford at the time. But for me, it's this beautiful nostalgic meal, whereas my mom in her brain felt so guilty serving that to me because it was all she had, but we didn't really know that. I talk about the dollar store cookies. They're one of my favorite cookies as a kid, but realizing now that they did such a good job of shielding us for that. So as much as I'm grateful for that shielding, I think that it goes the opposite way too, that we were shielded from having conversations that could have been really beneficial for us once we hit adulthood.
And then makes you wonder, well, why did we have to be shielded from that, right? And it's okay, right? But then you kind of take that with you and like, should I be shielding talks about money? Like you said, you know, you had that conversation with Sylvia and felt a little bit.
Yeah, like I'm thinking shame. I think there's like a weird, there's a weird vibe with money.
Right.
You know, like you said, you felt icky when you were talking about it, and even when we share things afterwards, you're like, oh, is that an overshare? What am I allowed to talk about? Like, you feel sort of funny about it, and I think it's really like it's curious to me how we got there, and I think if we're kind of putting it on a shelf and never talking about the good parts about it, I think we are missing out a little bit. Of course, we don't want to burden our children with all the things, and yes, let's make all the best memories ever. But yeah, I think there's like, we need to
teaching
unpack
moments
that
too,
shame.
right?
Why do we feel that way?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you say that, you know, now in your relationship and your marriage, how you see money, like, you know, now you have two incomes going in and how you feel about that. I'm the same way. Like, I grew up, my mom kind of did all of the money stuff. You know, she was the one that, you know, paid all the bills, knew when stuff was due, who owed who, and all that stuff. So I did that for myself all the way until I got married. And then there's this big discussion when you get married. You're like, okay, everything's in one pot. You're like, but is it? Is it one pot? Right. Like,
Who's watching this pot?
Yeah, I'm like, but who's turning it? But like, but what if?
I'm just like, give me the pot.
Yeah,
I have the pot.
And so I feel like even now I'm struggling. Like, I've been with my husband, you know, together for like 2 decades almost, but we still have this weird, like, I'm still very weird about talking about money even with him. And he grew up in a very different financial situation, and you know, he did have like some of the similar like experiences that I did growing up, but they were almost on the other spectrum where their family was very financially literate, and they learned all about savings and investings, and there was a lot of like, you know, diverting your finances and like having multiple streams of income. And like, I didn't grow up like that because that wasn't, I'm going to use this word, I know it's tossed around, but privileged to kind of have that
100%,
experience.
Yeah. And it's a form of literacy that isn't available to everyone, you know, if you're growing up that way. My partner studied finance in school, so he, you know, learned
That's what Jan did too.
Of course.
Of course.
They're like the same. But yeah, Travis taught himself. And so thankfully we have those conversations. And actually we're pretty okay to have money conversations, but I think it's because he has this knowledge and he does it for a living, so he doesn't feel funny about it at all. And it kind of like rubs off on me. But outside of that, that's what I'm like, I don't know, like, what am I allowed to talk about? But I think that we should be moving more towards, like, I know, Alicia, you've posted things in the past, and I'm like, yes, like, let's have more of these conversations online. And when you shared that, we had a conversation in DMs that I'm sure you had more than one. But I think the more we do it, the better.
And like, when you mentioned that you didn't learn it in school, I was thinking, nothing.
I did. I learned a little bit in school.
Did you?
Yep, in grade 8, I remember, in...
Go Cape Breton.
right, good old French immersion. I did it in like a PDR class, and so we all had to pick, but I made a rookie move. I thought I was gonna be a dentist when I grew up, so I thought I didn't have any problems coming my way, because I was going to be ballin'. But yeah, I remember they were like, pick your profession. These are the salaries for that profession. These are all of your expenses for every month. So this is where you're going to live, or these are your bills. And so
I would have loved that.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
So smart.
So there was a little bit, and then I did like accounting in high school. So I, you know, there's the columns, whatever, you have to balance them. It's important.
Did not have that either. Did you guys?
I definitely think I did like activities like that, and I think I did accounting in high school. But I don't remember.
But it's not relevant to you in that moment.
Didn't resonate.
Right? Yeah. So you don't. You're when you're a kid, you're like, my mom's got this sorted. I don't need to learn this. Why don't
Shout out to my mom for doing my taxes. Right? But yeah, and I think too, it's one of those things that you just said. It wasn't really relevant at the time, and then I turned 18, and I was able to get a credit card, and I was like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna give me money. And I was like, it was this mini student, $500 student visa. In my brain, I was like, I'm gonna make more than that bi-weekly. No matter how I max it out, I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, my bank was like, here's more money. You can have more credit. You can have more credit. And that's where I was like, okay, cool. And then eventually it was too deep for me to even do anything about
And
it.
it happens so much quicker than I think people realize, because especially when you're using a card, so they always say use cash, right? Because if you have $100, you want to keep your $100. If you're using a card, then it's like, oh, oops, I just bought a Chanel purse. Like, how'd that happen? six grand later. And then, oh, I just went out for dinner and spent $200. It's so easy to do that. And if you're not kind of like checking back, which who teaches you to do that, right? You're like, I have all the money in the world. Visa's giving it to me. So it's so easy to happen. And I think we have a lot of judgments around money, and I don't think that it's fair, because there's so many things that contribute. There's so many reasons for how people get where they are, or maybe that's just where you started and you are just trying your best, you know?
Well, and everybody's trying their best, right?
Exactly.
Like you said, there's so many outside reasons, and there's so
100%.
many things that we don't control in terms of society and the way things are going, and wages and inflation, and there's so many different things that contribute to, and other structural systematic factors, so many things, right? But people feel like it is a personal problem, right? Of course there's personal responsibility, of course, but it's not just personal responsibility. There's so many other
If you
contributing
don't have the
factors.
financial literacy, if you're making decisions that are bigger than you, maybe you buy a house you can't afford, and then something goes wrong and you can't fix it. There's just there's so much stuff.
Did you know that credit unions got their start giving loans to small businesses that weren't seen as viable by others? They were also the first place to lend money to women on their own, and credit unions brought the first ATMs to Canada. So aside from being trailblazers, their people and community-first attitude makes them the perfect place for all your money matters. Whether you're opening your first account, looking for a mortgage, or just seeking some simple advice for saving, they'll take care of you. Credit unions are proud to sponsor Your 2 Cents, the podcast, because they know the more we talk about money, the less scary it'll be.
Now that we're older and we've all kind of moved through all of these phases of life that we're in now, what do you wish your parents taught you when you were younger that you wish had carried through your life?
I wish I would have known that debt was normal.
And it's okay in some instances.
I think that the consensus that I've gotten after opening up and sharing my story and talking to people is that there's just this looming cloud of shame that people have over their head when it comes to debt. And like my sister, like doing everything right, on paper, has her master's, a teacher, her husband's a Red Seal electrician, they own a home, they have 2 cars, they have a baby. On paper, they followed the step, they've got a dog. Like they followed the steps of this, the stereotypical normal way to travel through life, and they can't feel as successful as they should feel because they're carrying a debt, but the debt is normal, and in order to have the things that they have, you had to get that debt. So I think just having those conversations makes it easier, and it gets people away from feeling shame around that and more apt to ask questions, because I didn't ask questions until it was too late for me to ask questions, until I was so far into debt that my credit score was shot and we were having debt collectors call and I was so scared to answer my phone, and then we're having conversations with debt collectors who are awful, and just this looming feeling and sense of like inaccomplishment, whereas I just was struggling. Like I didn't have a job, we were living paycheck to paycheck, I just needed help, and not a single person wanted to help me. And I think that I wish somebody would have said like, you're okay though. Like this is
Right.
Like,
Or say, I'm also living paycheck to paycheck. We also,
like we're all, I get you.
Right.
Yeah. So I think when I opened up and shared that, people were like, oh wow, okay, like me too.
Right.
And it was like a big moment for me to realize that I had felt, and I think that my whole platform in general is I made myself feel alone, made myself feel like it's this personal thing, when if we just started talking to each other about it, like the debt collectors wouldn't get away with the things that they say on the phone and the things that they make people, vulnerable people do. And so I think that that's kind of where I wish is that I would have known that debt is normal. It's not a shameful thing, so that when I carried it, I wouldn't have felt ashamed to ask questions sooner than I did.
Yeah, because you're not going to ask for help if you're embarrassed. 100%.
And especially if you think you're one of the only ones, right? But if you knew everybody else, like the majority of people were also carrying around debt, and lots of people continue to live paycheck to paycheck. It's
And I
very
think
much
that-
a reality.
That's going to be a reality for a lot of people forever.
Yeah.
Right?
Kind of getting worse, right? Yeah.
100%. The
Yeah.
pandemic really just
Definitely.
shifted a lot of things for a lot of people. And like the other, to your point, like you feel like you're alone, but also to get information or to like to know that there's like people you can talk to, or like there's different things that you could do to help bring down your debt in a healthy way or like a manageable way.
Yeah. Or like you can call banks on the phone so you don't have to go in person. And so, you know, it's Rhonda from wherever. She's gonna walk you through what to do and help you, you know, make savings deposits that just like repeats. You don't have to worry, you don't have to think about it. There's so much stuff that you can do, but if you think, I have to face it, I have to like go stare at someone, and that's a totally different thing.
And I wish someone had told me that even when you do all the right things, you're still going to be living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
Because you
We
sort
kind
of,
of were sold a false
Yeah,
ideal. I think
yeah.
our parents had a very different situation, and I don't know, we have a similar education background, and it costs a lot of money to be a teacher, to make no money, you know, and it's a job that people look at as a great job to have, but to pay back that, I'm still paying back my student loan, and I'm 36 years old, and I didn't even get hired in the job that I went to school for because there was a massive recession literally the year I graduated. So it just did not work out. But yeah, I feel like there was, I don't know about you, but I felt a bit of like anger and resentment in that moment, because it's like, oh, I did the things you told me to do, and I'm not where I want to be, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to fix it. And that's where the shame comes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And everyone cheering you on. But, oh, you went to university, and then,
Why are you
then you look at
teaching?
your
Why
friends
are
who
you
went to
teaching?
trades, and they're like balling, and you're still in school working, writing all these papers, and you have all this debt, and they're like, you know, working and making money. But again, that's perceived. You think that they are, who knows? So I think it's funny, we were talking about, you know, people were talking about when you're younger and growing up, and my mom used to tell us stories about how she would be so embarrassed to go to school with lobster sandwiches every single day. And that didn't make sense to me, right? That didn't make sense to me because I didn't get to go to school with lobster sandwiches. But the difference then was that was she classified it as a poor man's food, and she would get bullied and made fun of for taking those sandwiches to school. And again, she carried all of that with her as she was younger, and my nanny, her mom, worked 5 different jobs at times and did whatever she could just to put lobster sandwiches in their lunch boxes, right? So for her as a kid, she carried all of that with her as she got older, and then she kept all of that anxiety around money and, passed it on. But again, parents do the best that they can with what they know. And I know for me now, I'm now a parent, I have children. One of my biggest goals is to better myself and my own financial literacy so that I can pass on healthy thoughts and healthy habits when it comes to money to my kids, because you gotta, it has to stop somewhere. You gotta stop it.
Can you imagine if your kids asked you to send them to school with lobster sandwiches in 2022?
Absolutely not. It's like a lobster roll.
First of all, how are we storing it? From a food safety standpoint.
I'd like some melted butter with that as well. Drizzle.
Just open up the lunch box.
Everyone would be so jealous.
It's outrageous how much that's changed. The thought of that. Yeah.
I thought about having one at Subway the other day, but I pulled up and I think the footlong was like $25.99 or something. Absolutely not.
Turkey it is.
Cold cut.
Was your nanny like in the fisheries or a fisherman or
So
fisher
she
person?
did fishing. She helped people build. She worked she opened up her own convenience store. She kind of did it all.
incredible.
She did it all, and she lived to 103. So
That's amazing. It's a really interesting thing because it's the trauma of money sort of passes through generationally. And you talked about back to school being a really stressful time for you. Is it still a stressful time for you?
It is. I think I'm less stressed about it, now. I have 2 kids in school, but when Mia was leaving the daycare world and going into school for the first time, I wasn't actually stressed about it, but I remember I need to tick everything off on this list, and I need to make sure she has everything, because there were many first days of school where I didn't have 60% of the things, mainly because I didn't know how to communicate those needs from school to my parents, and there's a language barrier that's beyond, but also I kind of felt guilty saying
to
I
ask.
need this brand new thing or like this thing that we never owned before. So I just didn't let my parents know. I tried to do a lot of things on my own, and I think I'm still that way. But with Mia started school, I remember immediately I had this anxiety. I was like, I need to check everything off. She needs to have every single thing in that list.
Right, the first day.
The first day, I don't want her to feel like how I did, walking into a classroom, not sure if I even have the right binder, size, color, pocket, no fasteners, whatever it is that they have now.
Pink highlighter.
Exactly, they're so specific. And then I rang everything in, I collected everything. I just, for fun, I added up the receipts, and we reused her backpack from daycare, so that was $60 that I saved. But also backpacks are $60 now. Okay.
And they're tiny.
They're tiny. They barely carry a lunch bag. But I added everything. It was like hundreds of dollars. If you were to buy everything new, and I think 30% of the items that first year were from Dollarama. Dollarama.
Yes, yeah.
And it's supposed to be the most, cost-efficient way to, but it wasn't. And then I started having this anxiety for I'm like, well, who's going to show up in our class or a class? And yeah, and I think that will always stick with me a little bit. Like, I don't want my kids to feel without, but then how do you make sure that they aren't without, but also understand the importance and appreciating not going through that experience? How do we do that?
Yeah, without being like, so when I went to school, this happened, and then you're giving the trauma to them, but in some ways it's good to sort of know that maybe not everyone has the same capacities, or I don't know. I shouldn't be commenting.
Yeah, but you talked about filling backpacks for other children who may be in need, right? So I think that's a good opportunity to include your kids in that and say, this year we're going to donate 5 backpacks to students who may not have, their families may not have the ability to get all of their supplies. And then I think that's a age appropriate way to open up that discussion, right? Not all families have the same amount of money, the same opportunities. They don't have the same things available to them.
And when you have, you also give.
Right, it's a perfect way.
That you got to a place that you came from scarcity and thinking, oh, I have to make all this money, to being like, oh, actually no, I can also give back, which I think is incredible, and it definitely shows your growth with money, instead of feeling like, oh, I just have to tread water and not really think about it. But I think when you get to a place where you're like, no, actually I can do this, I think that's incredible. And that's the goal, right? That's why we all want to go further, so we can help others. And I think as long as we hold on to that and chat about that with our kids, then that's the way to go.
You have a relatively new little person in this world. So Alicia had mentioned earlier that she really admires you because you did all the right things, and then you made the comment of, but I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. So how does that feel, not necessarily that, but hearing these stories of how that's getting passed on, how does that sort of sit with you?
I think that I sort of, especially when it comes to my son, I get in this mindset of that I'll get him whatever he wants. And that probably doesn't
You're not
help.
alone. You're not alone at all. You're not alone.
It probably doesn't help the paycheck to paycheck bit. So sometimes I'm like, ooh, probably don't need to get him a toy every time we go into a store. But if he smiles at it. But yeah, I think the main thing that I want to do is make sure that he knows that money just doesn't grow on trees, because there's a balance between, hey, you can have whatever you want, and them not understanding that, mom and dad work really hard for this and we have to budget.
Seriously. Okay. Alicia, have you ever lied to someone about how much money you make?
Oh, all the time.
See, that wasn't so hard. Turns out we all have more things in common than we probably realize when it comes to money. So here's to getting it out in the open and sharing tips and tricks, and no longer making the subject a secret shame you keep to yourself. Thanks so much to the women on our panel for being so open. It's funny, my first paying Mick job as a kid was at a fast food restaurant in Halifax. I was 15 years old, making $2.05 an hour, and, best part, got a free meal every shift. I was so pumped I'd tell anyone who would listen. But no question, no matter how you grew up, talking about money can feel kind of gross, which is one of the reasons we make this podcast with our partners at credit unions, who are real Atlantic Canadian people just like us, who know that this subject can be scary and are there to help answer any and all questions you might have. Thanks for listening.